So I'm going to share with you 5 things that may surprise you about 501c3 status. Let's get into it. Hey there, this is Tiffany with Boss on a Budget. So I help people start their nonprofits and raise money for their nonprofits, and I share helpful information every week about the startup journey. So if you need that information, make sure you are subscribed to this channel because I'm always sharing value to help you start your nonprofit. And today I wanted to go in to 501c3 status because, of course, with anything with nonprofits, there's a lot of misconceptions and myths and just confusion. So I wanted to share 5 things that may surprise you or 5 things you may not have known about 501c3 status in this video. Now, I have covered 501c3 status in other videos. So I've talked about what is a 501c3 organization. I'm linking that above. I've also talked about what are the benefits of 501c3 status, and I'm also linking that video. But this is a complement to those videos just to help you understand, because I know sometimes you got to hear stuff different ways and over again to really get it. So I'm going to give a basic definition just so you can understand this video, but it will be really helpful if you've watched those videos that I referenced before. So 501c3 is one type of federal tax-exempt status for nonprofit organizations. So that means that if you don't want to pay income tax on the money that you make as a nonprofit, then you would seek 501c3 status among other types of statuses, which I want to talk about today. So it means that if you make income as a nonprofit, then you're entitled to be exempt from having to pay taxes on it. All right. So that's a very, very basic definition, but I just did that so you can understand what we're talking about today. But again, if you want more in depth, go to those videos. So here's the first thing that may surprise you about 501c3 status. You do not necessarily need it to fundraise for your nonprofit. Now, there's a lot of caveats to this because what you may not realize is that states regulate how people or organizations raise money. So a lot of people think, well, I can't ask for money as a nonprofit organization until I get my paperwork from the IRS. But the thing you got to realize is that people fundraise all the time, right? And legally and without 501c3 organization. And you don't necessarily have to be a nonprofit to ask for money. So this is where the state comes in, because the states regulate how you're supposed to solicit money from individuals, right? So you more than likely need to go to your attorney general's office. That's usually where this information sits. And you need to research the charitable solicitation rules or charitable registration requirements, because in most instances, if you fulfill the requirements of your state, then you can ask for money. 501c3 status comes into play when, based on the money you earn, the question about whether or not you're going to get taxed on that money. So if you don't want to get taxed on that money, then you need to go ahead and get your status. Now, there are some caveats. So if you're making less than $5,000, all those kind of things impact this, whether or not the IRS cares or go after you. But that's why you got to do your research. I'm just here to give you basic information, but I'm dropping some information on the IRS below so you can learn for yourself. The other thing I want to add is that your state may require that you have 501c3 status before you fundraise. Now, obviously, in those situations, yes, you got to have 501c3 status before you fundraise, but that is not the case in a lot of states. In a lot of states, you just have to pay their fee, you have to apply, and then you can start asking for money. But the kicker is, if you know you're going to get money from people who reside or a grant funder that's in a certain state, then you need to research the requirements in that state. It's not just about where you're located, it's about where the people are located that you're soliciting to. So it's really important for you to check out charitable solicitation rules so you can understand that landscape. I did a video on this because there was a guy in Connecticut who got hemmed up because of this and had to pay a lot of money in taxes. So it's up to you to do your research before you put your neck out there with fundraising. But the bottom line is you don't necessarily need 501c3 status to ask for money and fundraise for your nonprofit. I said I was almost done, but I'll say this. If you are looking for grants, more than likely you will need 501c3 status. Most grant funders will not give out money unless you have that. So when I was talking about fundraising, I really meant from individuals. Most grant funders, so that could be foundations and even corporations, typically prefer you to have 501c3 status if they're going to give you a grant. The second thing that may surprise you about 501c3 status is that it's not the only type of federal tax-exempt status. People get really confused when we start talking about nonprofits because you may not realize it, but when you're using the word nonprofit, you are referring to a lot of different organizations. There are a lot of different types of nonprofits, and not all of them are charitable, right? So you may have a nonprofit association, right? Or maybe you have a nonprofit club where the reason why you got started was not necessarily to benefit the public, but it was to benefit your members, right? So like sororities or clubs or associations, things like that. So they're basically saying, we're not really in this to make money, but we do need to make money to run, right? To operate. But when we make that money, please don't tax us. So some people or some organizations become nonprofits because they are to benefit just the members. So you don't have to have a public benefit or a charitable, purpose or focus to be a nonprofit. That may surprise you. So I'm saying all that to say 501c3 typically represents those organizations that are charitable, organizations that are organized for specific purposes like religious, education, scientific purposes. That's what 501c3 is designated for. But there are other 501cs that are still considered tax exempt and are designated for nonprofits. There's 501c4s, and those are typically for organizations that want to do more lobbying or do more work in the political realm, because there are some limitations for 501c3 organizations, right? So there are 501c4s, 501c7s, and 9s. I like calling those out because they're the ones I remember the most. But just to let you know that 501c3 is not the only status, and you need to do your research to make sure you're going after the right status. Now, for most of you watching this channel, it's because you have like a mission focus and you want to help the general community and the public. So 501c3 typically applies to you, but maybe not. So make sure you do your research. The third thing that may surprise you about 501c3 status is that you can actually lose your status. And the reason why I like talking on Boss on a Budget is because I talk from personal experience. So I have been in an experience where I worked with an organization and we lost our status and we had to get it back. And it's not a good feeling, but I like to talk about it because it's a reality. It happens to quite a bit of people, and it's okay. You're not a failure. It's okay. So I just want to let you know, though, that it is possible for you to lose your status. And in the two main ways you'll lose your status is, number one, if you are operating in a way that's different than what you indicated is your charitable purpose. Now, when you apply for 501c3 status and you use either the 1023 or the 1023-EZ form to get your status, you state for the IRS what your charitable purpose is. You got to be very mindful of what you put on that paper, because then the IRS is going to hold you to what you put on that paper. So if you begin operating outside of that scope and you do not adjust or update that with the IRS or connect with the IRS to let them know that your mission has been changed or updated, and you start doing activities that have nothing to do with your charitable purpose, you are putting your status at risk. The thing is, the IRS asks you to complete the 990 form, which is your annual information form, because they want to know what you're doing. They need updates on the type of activities you're doing, what kind of money you're raising, and where that money is coming from. Why do you think they're asking that? Because they want to make sure that you're still operating like you originally said, according to your charitable purpose. And if you start doing things like, business ventures that have nothing to do with your mission, but it's just for you to make money for your budget, the IRS is looking at that saying, well, then you're just operating like a regular business. Why do you need to be tax exempt? And it raises a lot of red flags for them. So you need to be mindful of staying focused on your mission, because if you don't, you risk losing your status. The other main reason why you may lose your status is because you don't file your 990 forms. So you are required. It doesn't matter whether or not you raised money or not. You are required to submit that 990 form every year. The IRS needs to know what you're doing. They need to understand what's going on. So if you do not fill out that form 3 years in a row, they're going to yank your status automatically. And the only way you're going to know is when they send you a letter after they've done it. So you just need to be mindful and stay up on everything and make sure you're putting in your paperwork. The fourth thing that may surprise you about 501c3 status is that there are different types of 501c3s. So you may not realize it, but when you're applying to get this status, you have to designate whether or not you are a public charity or a private foundation. A lot of people don't understand, first of all, that this distinction exists, and they don't understand the difference. And a lot of people make mistakes on the paperwork, and they mistakenly classify themselves as private foundations, which can be a huge and a costly mistake for people who want to do direct work in the community. That's why this distinction is really, really important for you to understand. Now, I've broken down the distinction in other videos, so just check out one of the videos I'm linking above for you to get it. But you just need to understand that you could be a 501c3 and be a foundation. A foundation that grants you money, yes. The foundations that give you grants, yes. They are 501c3 organizations too. And you may be operating in out here thinking, oh, I'm a nonprofit. They're different. They're foundations. They're not like me. They're very similar to you. They have to fill out 990 forms too. So you just got to understand when you're filling out the paperwork, which one you are, right? And make sure you put the right designation and understand that they serve different roles and different purposes, okay? And just make sure you know what you're doing when you approach that process. The last one I saved for the end on purpose because I feel like people really need to understand this. This one is 501c3 status is not a silver bullet for getting money. In other words, 501c3 status does not guarantee you any money and is not a fast ticket or a fast track to money. So a lot of people, the way they approach their nonprofit, they say in their minds, once I get 501c3 status, the world is going to open up for me. I'm going to get all these grants and it's just going to be on and popping from there. And so what a lot of people do is they'll put a lot of energy and there'll be a lot of excitement about filling out the paperwork. Then they're waiting for the paperwork and they're like, okay, they're doing nothing because they're just waiting for their paperwork. And then when they get the paperwork, they're like, okay, what now? And they're just sitting, waiting for something to happen. And one thing I want to let you know is that 501c3 status is just what it is. It just gives you the freedom to be able to access certain money and not have to pay income tax on your income. But it doesn't replace hard work. It doesn't replace networking. It doesn't replace relationships. It doesn't replace planning. And so you really have to make up in your mind that you want to be able to secure the money you need for your organization and start working towards that instead of leaning on some status that really is not going to guarantee you anything. There are a lot of people who thought having 501c3 status was going to get them something. They started their nonprofit and then did nothing with it. So I don't want you to go into this assuming that the status opens this door and everything just starts coming your way. No, you got to fight for your organization. You got to fight to be visible. You got to fight to raise money. You got to fight to attract the right people in your organization. And I may be a little dramatic with this, but I'm basically saying you have to put in the work, okay? So what I recommend you do, and I tell this to anybody when they're raising money, I tell this to my coaching clients, and if you're interested in coaching, check out my link and information below. But I tell people, always start with the goals you have for yourself. What is it that you want to accomplish with your nonprofit? How many people do you want to serve? What are the level of services? What do the services look like? That tells you how much it costs to fulfill your goals for the year. So that means you can create a budget that aligns with what you say you want to do. So you start creating a budget that talks about, okay, this is how much money we need if we want to accomplish this. That budget will give you a number that you know you need to raise for your nonprofit in order for it to run successfully for the year. So now you have a goal, you have a target, you know how much money you need to raise. Then you need to create a fundraising plan that outlines all the different ways you're going to employ to be able to reach that goal, right? You're going to think about getting money from your board. You're going to think about doing peer-to-peer fundraising. You're going to think about doing an end-of-the-year campaign. You're going to think about corporate gifts and corporate sponsorships. You're going to think about community grants. But that number that you have needs to be broken down, right? So you're probably not going to get that full number from only grants. And you honestly don't want to do that because grants can be restrictive. You want to have different types of money or types of income. So you want to start breaking down and say, okay, this much is going to come from this much is going to come from this, right? And that begins to develop your fundraising plan. Now, if you are clueless about fundraising, as I said before, you can sign up for coaching with me to help guide you through that process. I also have a fundraising masterclass which breaks down fundraising plans for you, and it has a template for a fundraising plan. So if you need that help, check out the description box below. So thank you so much for watching. As I say always, I hope this was helpful. If you have any questions, put them in the comments. If you need help with your nonprofit, visit me at bossonabudget.com, and I will see you in the next video.